Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Chanukah, and Emir Hashem, in this video we will complete Daf Kuf Mem Vav Amud Beis and learn Kuf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph as well. So we are holding in Siman Taf Reish Ayin Zayin. We are in the midst of Sif Aleph. We pick up today on Kuf Mem Vav Amud Beis, second line down, with the words of the Ramah. Now, before we go into the Ramah, we just have to briefly recap what it is that the Mechaber just finished saying. We're talking about a guest who is staying in somebody else's home. And the Mechaber just told us that if this guest is sleeping in a room where he has his own door going to the exterior of the home, then the Mechaber said, even if this person has somebody lighting on his behalf back at home. So let's say back at home he has a wife who's lighting in his home, and really his wife's lighting covers him. Or even if he was mishtatif bepriti, even if he gave a couple of coins to the balabas where he's staying to become a shutif in his Chanukah licht, which we said also could really cover him and take care of his chiyuv of Neres Chanukah. Still in all, since he has his own door going to the exterior of the home, the Mechaber said he needs to light by that door. And we saw that the reason for that is because of chshad. Basically, back in the times of the Chazal, when people lit outside by the door, the expectation was if you see somebody staying in a home or in an apartment where he has a door going to the outside, you expect to see a mezuzah by the door. If you do not see a mezuzah by the door, that would seem to indicate that the resident of that home or that apartment is not being mekayim his chiyuv of Neres Chanukah. So therefore the Mechaber said, even though this achsanoi, even though this guest, really his chiyuv of Neres Chanukah is being covered by his wife back home or by the balabas that he's become a shutuf with, since he has a door going to the outside, he has to light by that door to dispatch that potential chshad, that no one should be choshed him, that he's not being mekayim his chiyuv. Now, in response really to that the Mechaber just said, now says the Ramah, v'yesh oimrim, there are those that say, the bizman hazeh, that nowadays, shemadlikim bifnim mamish, where we light really inside. And we'll see what that means. Why does the Ramah use these words, bifnim mamish? But the Ramah says, there's a yeshayim that says that nowadays where we really light inside, yadlik b'makom she'oichel, such an individual should light where he eats, v'chein nahagu, and that is our minig. He brings this down from the Rashba. It's a little bit vague, a little bit cryptic. At first glance, it's a little bit hard to really understand what it is that the Ramah is coming to say. And the Hagah is always, again, it's in reaction to what the Mechaber said, usually. So what exactly is the Ramah saying? How is he reacting to the Mechaber? I believe the answer is that there are two different points, really, that the Ramah is making over here. The first point that the Ramah is making is, the Mechaber again told us, if the achsanai has a door to the exterior, he has to light outside, even if he is otherwise, even if his chiyuv of Neres Chanukah is otherwise covered either by a wife at home or by a shituf with the balabayas. To that, the Ramah is saying, that's true b'mei Chazal. B'mei Gemara, that was true, because b'mei Gemara, people expected to see a menorah outside, and if they did not see a menorah outside, there would be a chshad generated, and therefore he has to light outside. To that, the Ramah says, not so nowadays. Nowadays we light inside. And therefore there is no chshad generated by not seeing a menorah outside. Nobody expects to see a menorah outside anymore. So right away, the Ramah kind of takes issue with what the Mechaber said, and that's why the Ramah reacts to the Mechaber and says, v'yeshayimrim, there are those that say, the bizman hazeh, that nowadays, shamadlikim b'fnei mamish, where we light inside, yadlik b'makom she'oichel, you would light inside where you eat, and there is no issue of having to light outside by the door because of chshad. So that's one point. One point is a disagreement with the Mechaber, and it's not so much a halachic disagreement. It's more like it is a halachic disagreement, but it's a disagreement based on mitzius, on the facts at hand. The Mechaber wrote what he wrote because b'mei Mechaber there was still an expectation to see a mezuzah by the door. The Ramah says now there is no expectation to see a mezuzah by the door. Therefore, the lack of a mezuzah by the door doesn't generate a chshad, and since it doesn't generate a chshad, there's no need for this person to light outside by the door. Now comes the Ramah, and the Ramah is making a second point. Now the Ramah says, okay, so we have established that an achsanoi, a guest in somebody else's home, he really has several different options. If he's being covered by a wife at home, he really doesn't have to light at all. If he wants, he could be mishtatif bepriti, he could give a couple of coins to the balabas, and he could be covered by the balabas's lighting. But then there's also another option, and that is, like we've continuously said, we're noig mahadrin min mahadrin. Since we're noig mahadrin min mahadrin, really everybody lights. Now, if this achsanoi wants to light his own menorah because he wants to be mekayim mahadrin min mahadrin, comes along a new question: where should he light? Now, if he has his own room and his room has a door to the exterior of the home, which is again the scenario that the Mechaber had just listed, and the Ramah is coming off of that scenario, then there may be a temptation to say, okay, where should he light? He should light by the door, because where else does he have to light? We're trying to decide where this person who's staying in somebody else's home, where should he light? Now remember, he's staying in somebody else's home. His room is miyuchid for him. His room is his. So, okay, I guess if he has a chaloin, if he has a window overlooking Rishus HaRabim, I guess he could light by the window to the Rishus HaRabim. But one of the first places we're going to think that a person should light is by the door. Because again, the Iker Taganos Chazal was always by the door. So since this fellow does have a door to the outside, maybe he should just light by the door. Says the Ramah, no. Again, for the same reasoning as the reasoning of his first point. Nowadays, we don't light by the door. Nowadays, nobody lights by the door. So since nobody lights by the door, says the Ramah, you know where this person should light? This person should light where he eats. Even though he only has one room in this house that's miyuchid for him, and therefore you might think he should light by the door to the exterior of the home, but it's by his room. Says the Ramah, no. The only adifus, the only mila that the door has is in the day when people lit by the door and they were concentrating on the Parsubi Nisa L'chutz by lighting by the door. But nowadays we light bifnim mamish, says the Ramah. What does bifnim mamish mean? What bifnim mamish means is, again, we've seen that the minig of menorah kind of went in phases. First they lit outside by the door. Then they lit inside by the door. But even when they lit inside by the door, there still was a Parsubi Nisa to the outside. Maybe they propped the door open. Maybe they opened and closed. But still, you could see the menorah from the outside. Says the Ramah, now we light bifnim mamish. Now people didn't light by the door at all. So therefore, says the Ramah, there's no mila to light by the door. Instead, where should he light? He should light where he eats. So the home has a dining room, and he eats in the dining room of the home. He should light in that area of the house. It doesn't necessarily mean on the dining room table, but in the open area, in the common public area of the house, nearby to where he eats. Why? Because that's his Iker Dira. Remember that this is something that we learned always very much when we were learning Chelik Daled and we were learning Hilchas Erevin, right? The Dira of an Adam, a person's Dira, is where he has his food. That's the backbone of Hilchas Erevin, right? You make it a Ruvei Chatzeros. What do? You all chip in with matzah, you all chip in with challah, and now my food is by your house, and now we look at it as if my Iker Dira is by your house. Why? Because that's where my food is. So the Iker Dira of the person is where his food is. So he shouldn't go ahead and light by the door to his room. He should instead light in the Makam Achila. That, I believe, is what this Ramah is saying. Now let's take a look at Mishnah Berurah's Katan Yud Aleph. V'yeshoymim de bizman hazeh v'ayin b'achreinim shekasvu the achreinim right. The gam hadei rishonim moed de bizman hazeh. The Mechaber also agrees to this Yesod that nowadays the kevet shamadlika b'fnim, since we light inside lekach shada me'ovrim v'shavim, there is no chshad generated by the fact that this gentleman doesn't have a menorah by his door to the exterior of the house, because nobody lights by the door. Elam ibn Abayis. The only possibility of chshad would be coming from the members of the household that he's living in, because the Bnei Rishus Harabim have no mokum for chshad. What? They don't see a menorah by the door, so what? Nobody lights by the door. And as far as the people inside the house, if he sets up a menorah in the dining room, so they know that he lit. Or they know that he gave a couple of quarters to the head of the household and he's being covered by his licht. Okay. He should light where he eats. Why? What's the yachas of the makom she'oichel? Says the Mishnah Berurah, because the place where the food is, that's his ikar dira. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, this adifus, this mila of the dining room is only in this case of an achsanoi. Well, let me take that back. This halacha that we're describing pertains to an achsanoi she'ein beisai etzloi. He's away from home. Like a scenario I gave yesterday, he lives in Flatbush and now he's in Lakewood. So he's not anywhere near his home. And he's going to light menorah tonight. We're trying to decide where he should light. So we say he should light in the home where he's located in the Makom Achila. He's not nearby to his home. Or this halacha could also come into play with an adult son who is samach al shulchan aviv. He eats by his father's table and he's supported by his father, but he has his own door to the outside, or he's lighting for Bahadrin min Mahadrin. And you want to know where he should light. So the answer is, don't light in your room, light in the common area of the home, light somewhere near the dining room. Aval, however, let's say somebody lives in Flatbush, and he went around the corner to his friend for supper on Chanukah, to having a Chanukah party. His house is around the corner. He has to go home to light Chanukah licht. You don't say, I'm around the corner by my friend for a Chanukah party, I'll light Chanukah licht by my friend in his dining room. No. And if he can't bring himself to go home for whatever reason, he should ask his wife that she should light for him in his home. But he shouldn't light in this friend's house where he's having a Chanukah party. And even in that case where he could technically ask his wife, certainly it's a bigger mitzvah for him to go home and light his own menorah than to ask his wife to light for him. Okay, now we go on to Sif Beis. Katan she'igia lechinuch tzarech lahadlik. A katan, a minor child who's igia lechinuch, is the age that it's already appropriate for him to have chinuch and mitzvah, 6 or 7 years old. Tzarech lahadlik, he needs to light Chanukah licht. Now, this is one of those se'ifim in Mishnah Berurah where you catch yourself if you're not chazering. Because the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out that there's an obvious stira over here in the Mechaber. The Mechaber over here, Tafrei Shayin Zayin Sif Yud Gimel, says Katan she'igia lechinuch tzarech lahadlik. A katan, if he's a igia lechinuch, he has to light his own menorah. Hold it. Wait a second. How does that make sense according to the Mechaber? We had a Mechaber. The Mechaber said, Siman Tafreish Ayin Aleph, Sif Beis, Kof Lamed Ches Amid Aleph. The Mechaber said, Kama Neris Madlik, how many Neris do you light? Balayla Rishon Madlik Echad, the first night you light one. Mikan Ve'elech Meisef V'Hoilech, each night you add on another one. Meisef V'Hoilech Echad B'Chalayla. You add on another Ner each night. According to the Mechaber, this is Mahadrin min Mahadrin. Ad shebalel achroin yushmaina. So you add on another ner every night until on the last night of Chag you have 8 neres. Va'afilu im rabim b'nei abayis, and even if there are a lot of people living in the home, lo yadliku yoser. You don't light more. This was the machlokes, the Mechaber and the Ramah that we had in Taf Reish Ayin Aleph. We're always used to hearing that the minig of Mahadrin, min Mahadrin, is that every member of the household adds on a new Chanukah licht for each additional night of Chanukah. But that's only true according to the Ramah, not according to the Mechaber. According to the Mechaber, Mahadrin min Mahadrin is that the head of the household adds on another additional licht for each night of Chanukah, but he's the only one who lights. Nobody else lights. So now, according to the Mechaber, over here, Siman Taf Reish Ayin Zayin Siv Beis is very strange. Cotton she'igil l'chinuch tzarich lahadlik. A cotton has to light. Why is the cotton lighting? His father is lighting, and he covers everybody else in the household, even for Mahadrin and Mahadrin. So why is the Mechaber telling me cotton she'igil l'chinuch tzarich lahadlik? Says the Mishnah Berurah, cotton yud. Cotton she'igil l'chinuch l'fi masha pasuk ha-Mechaber b'siman Taf Reish Ayin Aleph Sif Beis. According to the Mechaber in Taf Reish Ayin Aleph Sif Beis, da'afilu ha-Mahadrin bin ha-Mahadrin, that even according to the minig of Mahadrin bin ha-Mahadrin, ein madlikin rak ner echad l'chol anshe habayis, you only light one ner for each member of the household. V'rak shemisifin v'holchin b'chol yom ner echad yoser, and Mahadrin bin ha-Mahadrin is only that the head of the household adds an additional licht for each additional night of Chanukah, but still he's the only one lighting, no one else is lighting. So then, how does this Sif Beis have any meaning? Why is it cotton lighting? So says the Mishnah Berurah, Al Karchach, you're forced to say that the Mechaber over here in Sif Beis is saying, Shah cotton hazeh yesh l'bayis b'ftei atzmai. This is a cotton who's living at home alone. He doesn't have anybody to light for him. So you have a cotton who has his own household. So okay, cotton she'igil l'chinuch, he has to light. And therefore he has to make a bracha. He has to light. He has to make a bracha. Very odd case. But according to us, according to the Ramah, the Nahaginon, where our minig follows the Ramah, that every member of the household lights his own menorah and adds on another licht for each night. In Cain, gamakatan azet tzarich b'chol gavdi lahadlik b'fnei atzmai. Okay, so this has verter. We could understand the Mechaber according to the Ramah. Nowadays, you have a kid. He's 6 years old. We all do Mahadrim and Mahadrim. We all light our own menorah. The kid's got to light his own menorah. And we saw that in the Ramah in Taf Reish Ayin Hey. And that's on Kuf Mem Daled Amud Beis in the last line of the Shulchan Aruch, where the Ramah said, according to us, that the Mahadrim and the Mahadrin dictates that every member of the household lights. A cotton she'igil l'chinuch has to light. And that's why the Ramah wrote it in Taf Reish Ayin Hey, because you couldn't take it from the Mechaber, Taf Reish Ayin Zayin Siv Beis, because the Mechaber is talking about a very strange case. The Mechaber is talking about a case where a cotton lives alone. The Ramah is talking about any case, any household that has a kid that's igil l'chinuch, he or she has to light his own or her own menorah to be mekayim Mahadrin min ha-Mahadrin. Avaldas, and we have to finish up. Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Yud Gimel here. Avaldas shilte gibayrim v'ameiri da'afil didon ein tzarich l'chanukah kotod l'hadlik b'fnei atzmai. The shilte gibayrim and the meiri disagree with the Ramah. Now they agree with the Ramah's understanding of Mahadrim and Mahadrim. They agree with the Ramah that Mahadrim and Mahadrim dictates that every member of the household lights. Where they disagree with the Ramah is they disagree with the Ramah in Taf Reish Ayin Hey. The Ramah said, since we do Mahadrim and Mahadrin, and every member of the household lights, a cotton she'igil l'chinuch has to light. Says the Meiri and the Shilti Gebarim, no. There's no inyan, there's no chiyuv to be mechanech a cotton in hidur mitzvah. Again, the only reason the cotton would be lighting is to be mekayim Mahadrim and Mahadrim. Mahadrim and Mahadrim is a hidur mitzvah. We don't have to be mechanech a child in hidur mitzvah. We have a chiyuv of chinuch on the ikr mitzvah, but not on the chinuch. But if the cut does have his own household, then like the Mechaber says, he has to light. Okay, Siv Gimel. Yesh Oimrim. There are those that say, Sha'af al pi shemadlikin alav b'soich beisoi. Okay, the truth is, Siv Gimel needs a shtickle a hakdama. The hakdama that Siv Gimel needs is Taf Reish Ayin Vav Siv Gimel. Kuf Mem Hey Amin Aleph. Siman Taf Reish Ayin Vav Siv Gimel. In that Sif, the Mechaber introduced Birchas Haroya, the bracha that one makes on seeing Chanukah Neiros. What bracha? Who makes a bracha on seeing Chanukah Neiros? So the Mechaber told us in Taf Reish Ayin Vav Siv Gimel, he said, Mi shaloi hidlik. Somebody did not light menorah. Ve'enai asid lahadlik ba'isa alayla. And he is not going to light Chanukah licht. Ve'gam ein madlikin alav b'sag beisai. And he has nobody at home that's lighting on his behalf. So you could have cases like this. Fellow doesn't have a home where he has a wife at home that's going to light for him. Maybe he has a home, it's empty. He's away from home. He's in Europe. He's away from home. He has nobody back home who's lighting on his behalf. He wasn't mishtatif with anybody bepriti. And he's not gonna light. Maybe he simply can't light. He doesn't have any Chanukah licht. But he's walking outside in the street and he sees Chanukah licht. Says the Mechaber, Kisheroya ner Chanukah, when he sees a ner Chanukah, mevarech shasa nisim, he should make the bracha shasa nisim laviseinu. So the Mechaber introduced the concept of Birchas Haroya. But the Mechaber was very careful to say who exactly should make Birchas Haroya. He said, the only one who makes Birchas Haroya is A, if he's not lighting. If he is lighting, he shouldn't make Birchas Haroya because the Mishnah Berurah over there told us, since he has the opportunity to make the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim Laviseinu on his own hadlaka, he should make it over a hadlaka instead of seeing it on Re'iyah. It's much better to make the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim on a Maisa of hadlaka than it is to make it on Re'iyah. So certainly if he's going to light himself, he should not make the bracha on Re'iyah. Even if he has somebody else at home lighting for him. So he has a wife at home who's actually doing a hadlaka, and she's covering his chiyuv of lahadlik ner shel Chanukah and shasa nisim laviseinu b'yom mehem zman. So again, there's no reason for him to make a birchas hariyah, that he should make a bracha. He doesn't need to make the bracha. He has no chiyuv to make the bracha. So he shouldn't make the bracha. Okay, now, the Mishnah Berurah back in Taf Reish Ayin Vav, in Ois Katan Vav, brought down a Mordechai that disagrees with this latter point of the Mechaber. The Mishnah Berurah brought down a Mordechai who says, you're away from home and your wife is lighting for you back at home, so it's true that your chiyuv of Neres Chanukah was covered. That's true. But still, you should go ahead and you should make a bracha. You should make a bracha on the Re'iyah. It says like this: V'yesh paiskim desavri, da'afilu yedea shemadlikin alav b'veisai. Even if you taka know that you have a wife at home that's lighting for you, kevan dehu ba'atzmai einoi madlik, since you didn't light yourself. V'gam einoi mishtatif v'macherim b'priti, and you had nobody else lighting for you. You weren't mishtatif with a balabayas. You didn't pay a balabayas a couple of cents that he should light for you. Tzarich levarech ala re'iyah. He has to make the birchas hariyah lahaydai salanes, to thank the Rabbanu Shalom for the nes, and he should make a bracha. And the Mishnah Berurah is machriya, not like this Mordechai. He said you shouldn't do it because let me find it here. So again, so we had the Mechaber who very much narrowed down Birchas HaRe'iyah. The Mechaber said the only time you make Birchas Hariyah is if you didn't light, you're not gonna light, your wife's not lighting for you, you weren't Mishtatif Bepriti, you had no shayches to Neres Chanukah tonight. So okay, so you go out in the street, you see a menorah, make a bracha, Shasa Nisav Laviseinu, but Yom Mem is Manazeh. That's Birchas Hariyah. And why are you making Birchas Hariyah? Because if you don't make Birchas Hariyah, you have no connection to Neres Chanukah tonight. That was the opinion of the Mechaber. The Mishnah Berurah brought down a Mordechai. The Mishnah Berurah cut it back a little bit. Not cut it back. He expanded Birchas Hariyah a little bit, the Mishnah Berurah. And the Mishnah Berurah said, if you're not lighting and you're not gonna light, then even if your wife lit for you, or even if you are Mishtatif Bepriti, so your chiyuv of Neres Chanukah was covered by somebody else, you should still make a Birchas Hariyah. You still should say Shasa Nisam Laviseinu B'Yom Mizman Hazeh when you see somebody else's menorah. Why? Because even though your chiyuv of Neres Chanukah was covered, but you yourself did not give Shevach V'Yidah to the Rabbanu Shalom for the nace tonight. Your wife covered your chiyuv, but you didn't utter the bracha Shasa Nisam Laviseinu. So you saw somebody's menorah, you have an opportunity to make the bracha Shasa Nisam Laviseinu, you should do it. That's the Mordechai that the Mishnah Berurah quoted in Siman Tafresh Ayin Vav. Now we have an interesting Mechaber here in Tafresh Ayin Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Yesh Omer, there are those that say, and the Beragola brings this down first from the Maria Abuav, then the Archas Chaim, and finally V'chein Kasav HaMordechai. This is that Mordechai that the Mishnah Berurah brings down. Says the Mechaber, Yesh Omerim, there are those that say, Sha'afal Pisha Madlikin Olav B'Sach Beisai, even if this guy has a wife at home who's lighting for him, Imhu B'Makom She'ein Bo Yisrael, if he is located in a place where there are no other Yidden, so he's not, unless he lights, he's not going to see a menorah. So this guy has a wife at home who's covering his chiyuv of Neres Chanukah. She's lighting for him. But he is in Yena Ekveld. And where he is, there ain't a Jew in sight. He's in North Dakota, 600 miles to the nearest Chabad house. He's not going to see a menorah tonight unless he lights a menorah. Yesh Omerim, says the Mechaber, in such a case, Sha'afal Pisha Madlikin Olav B'Sach Beisai, Imu B'Makom She'ein Bo Yisrael, so he's not going to see a menorah. Madlik, he should light a menorah, Bibrachos, with the brachos. Hagah, says the Ramah, what's the pshat in this Mechaber? Ki chayiv lirois haneros, because he has a chiyiv to see the neros. V'chein noyagin. So what's this combination of the Mechaber and the Ramah saying? This guy really does not have to light Chanukah neros. His wife lit for him, but he's not going to see Neres Chanukah. Therefore, the Mechaber brings down the Mordechai, who holds that he should light with the bracha because he has the chiyuv to see Neres Chanukah. Now, this is a direct contradiction to the Mechaber's opinion in Tafresh Ayin Hey Sif Gimel. Over there, the Mechaber said, you only make the Birchas Hariyah if nobody covered you at home. Over here, he's saying, even though this gentleman is covered by his wife's lighting at home, he still makes the Birchas Hariyah. He's going to light with a bracha because he has a chiyuv to see. He has a chiyuv to see the menorah. Now, if that's true, then that guy back in Tafresh Ayin Vav, in Tafresh Ayin Vav, Siv Gimel, that guy who's covered by his wife's lighting at home, right? When he sees the neros, he goes outside, he sees neros, he should make a bracha because he has a chiyuv to see the neros. So it's very nice, his wife covered him, but he's a chiyuv to see the neros. Now he sees the neros, he should make a bracha. So this is a contradiction to the earlier Mechaber. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to point this out. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your down. Kichayv l'rois. Zeh soiser l'sivin tafresh ayin vasiv gimel. The soiver sham, because over there the Mechaber holds, the kisham adlikin bebeisai, when somebody's covered by the lighting that's going on in his house, ain't tzarich levarach al riyah. He doesn't have to make a bracha on riyah. And over here he's saying, you do. V'din de kan hu min Mordechai. Over here the Mechaber is quoting the Mordechai. V'sham sasam ha-Mechaber Kishari paiskim shecholkin alav. Back over there in Tafresh Ayin Vav, and the Mechaber was paskening like those who disagree with the Mordechai. The Lachaina therefore Ladina halacha lamaisa ein linay kein lahadlik bebracha. So halacha lamaisa, this person should not light with a bracha. Now comes the punchline. El im kein sheyomar, unless what he does is he says sheina ratzalase spadlakas ishtay. What this guy could do, he says, you know what? I know my wife is lighting at home, but I don't want to be yotze with her lighting, so I'm not yotze with her lighting, and now I'll light my own. Like the Ramah is about to discuss. Okay, now let's go further in the Ramah, where the Ramah discusses this. Bottom line, on Kuf Ben Vav and Beis, near the end of the line. Even if this fellow, who is covered by his wife lighting for him at home, even if he's in a Yiddish place, and he sees other people lighting, and therefore he could even be Mekayim the Mordechai, he could make a Shasa Nisim on the menorahs that he sees outside. If he wants to be Machber, or Lahadlik B'fnei Atzmai, and he wants to light his own menorah, Madlik, he could light his own menorah, or Mavarech Aleim, and he could certainly make a bracha. Lahadlik Ner Shechaneka Shasa Nisim Lavisenu. He could go get his own menorah, light his own menorah, go ahead. Now, the chiddush of this is, think about it for a minute. If you have a wife at home that is capable of lighting for you and being mitzi you, why is it such a davar pashut that you could be machmer and light your own menorah? Why is it that kind of like a bracha she'ein tzricha? You're making an unnecessary bracha. What do you mean? She covered me with my chiyuv. And not only that, how am I allowed to make another bracha? What chiyuv do I have? If she lit and she covered my chiyuv, how could I go now and make a bracha? I was ready to the mitzvah. It's like making a bracha on your lulav and esrog, doing nanuim, putting it down, coming back an hour later, making another bracha. What do you mean? You were yoytz in the mitzvah already today. How are you going ahead and doing it again? So, says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Tezvav, V'im Reitz Alachber. Ritzayna Loimar, what the Rama wants to say is, after Medina Potter Lahadle, Kim Hadlikin Alav Bevesai, even though Mayikar Adin, this person is Potter, he has no chiyuv to light Chadikaneris, because his wife lit for him. Nevertheless, if if he wants to be Machmer Lahadlik Ba'atzma and he wants to light on his own, Rashoy, he's allowed to. Ubavad, Sheyichavin B'machshavtoi, Kaidim Shas Hadlaka, but before he lights, he has to have in his mind, Sheina Ratza Lases B'Shalishtoi, that he doesn't want to be Yotze with his wife's lighting. Umemela less kan mishum bracha levatala, and then he's not making a bracha levatala. The kev chain writes the losses padlakasa because since he has in mind that he doesn't want to be yotze with his wife's lighting, chal chiyav hadlakale. So now he does have a chiyav of hadlaka. Maybe many achronim take a rule this way, but v'yesh ben ha-paiskim shesovrim. There are those paiskim that hold. Acharei de chazal patru hu ayidei hadlakas ishtoi. Since Chazal said that really this person has no chiyuv to light because he's really covered by his wife's lighting, what right does he have to say, I don't want to be yotze with my wife's lighting? So let's get this straight. In Eis Katan Tezvav, what the Mishnah Berurah said was, the Ramah is saying, you want to be machmir and you want to light on your own and you don't want to be covered by your wife's lighting, you have the right to do that. But before the Zman Hadlaka, you should have in mind, I'm not yotze with my wife. That way, your wife didn't cover you and now you light your own. Now, in Eis Katan Tezayin, the Mishnah Berurah is taking it a notch further. Now the Mishnah Berurah says, there are those paiskim. And in the Shar Tzion, he brings this down. Beis Yosef, Mashal, Pri Chadash. He brings down, there are all those paiskim that say, whoa, wait a minute. Who are you to turn around and say, I don't want to be covered by my wife's lighting? Chazal told you that you are potter from lighting Neres Chanukah tonight because you have a wife at home who's fully capable of lighting for you. So Chazal pottered you. You're going to go ahead now and say, I want to have the chiyuv? He writes the likes of Shalishti. And therefore, these paiskim say, v'yadlik b'loy bracha. He wants to light, he can light, but without a bracha. V'hine. After v'adar ein lim chayis b'yad ha'noyeg in levarech, Mishnah Berurah says, You certainly can't protest against somebody who wants to be machmer, wants to light, and actually wants to make a bracha. Because many achreinim agree with that and say you could make a bracha. Nevertheless, toiv yoiser lahader, it would be best to be mahader lishmaya habrachos mipi acher v'yana amen. You want to be machmir, let somebody else be mitzi you with the brachas. V'yechavin lotzis behen, v'yadik neiroisa, and then light your neiros. Or alternatively, yira l'shar lahadlik neiroisa v'levarach alein zman ma kaidem b'shamad lekas ishtoi bebeisai. Call up your wife, say, honey, what time are you lighting? You're lighting at 4:30. You make sure to go ahead and light at 4:20. That way, what do you mean? Right now I have a chiyuv. My wife didn't light. I have a chiyuv. Dahainu shehi madlekes acha ma'ariv. Let's say she's lighting after ma'ariv. Kiminig ha'olam. V'hu yad l'koy the ma'ariv. You light before ma'ariv. That solves the problem handily. Now we go to Siv Dalet. Says the Mechaber. So you lit your Chanukah licht on Chanukah. You have leftover oil. Hanoiser b'yom hashmini min hashemen. The leftover oil on the 8th day of Chanukah, but leftover from what oil? Says the Mechaber. Hanoiser b'yom hashmini. The leftovers on the 8th day. Min hashemen atzarich l'shir hadloka. From the oil that was necessary to burn for the minimum shear of a half an hour. That's the oil that we're talking about. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Yud Zayin. Hanoiser b'yom hashmini. The first thing to realize is we're talking about the leftover oil only on the 8th day of Chanukah. We're not worried about leftover oil from any other day. The Baleilas HaKaidmin, any leftover oil from the earlier days of Chanukah, im noiser, if they're leftover, use it for the next night. Right? You have leftover oil after the first time of Chanukah, you're not going to pour that oil out. Just add on to that oil. So the leftover oil, use it night 2. If it got mixed into other oil, that we'll discuss later on. So we're talking about the leftover oil on the 8th day, and also we're only talking about oil that was left over from the oil that you needed to burn for the Zman HaChiv. If you have big cups that burn for 4 hours, like many of us do, we're not concerned with the last half hour worth of oil, or the last 2 hours, or the last almost 3.5 hours worth of oil. We're not worried about that, because none of that oil was hooked to the mitzvah, according to this shita. None of that oil was needed for the mitzvah. The mitzvah is only half hour. We are only concerned with mitzvah oil. What's the mitzvah oil? That's the oil that you needed to burn for a half hour. You filled up your cup with enough oil to burn for a half hour. And then it went out. We know kafsa ein zakakla. It went out after 10 minutes. You have to relight it. So there's 20 minutes of oil left. But that 20 minutes of oil was hooked to l'mitzvasai, because that's part of the original half-hour oil. The half-hour oil is mitzvah oil. The 2-hour oil, 3-hour oil, that's not mitzvah oil. Maybe it's hiddur mitzvah oil, but it's not mitzvah oil. It's only the first half hour that's mitzvah oil. How do you have oil left from the first half hour? It was mechuyev to burn for a half hour. It went out. Kavsei and zakakla, you're not mechuyev to relight it. So hainu shaloi nasa tchila rak yishir adlaka, v'nichpa be'emtza v'noiser. V'lachein, and therefore aser. That oil is aser, and that's why we have to have a sif in Shulchan Aruch discussing what you should do with that oil. The hook sel mitzvasai v'asal lihane semenu. It's hook sel mitzvasai and it's asavana. Avalim nasan harbe baner v'noiser. But if you put 4 hours of oil in your cup and now there's leftovers, mutter l'hishtamish ba l'chatchila. You're allowed to use that leftover oil l'chatchila. V'da, however, you should know, like many things in halacha, not so simple. V'da, you should know, the yesh paiskim shesayvrim, there are paiskim that hold, the nasan hashemin bistam. If you went and filled up your 4-hour cup on the menorah, and you didn't make any kind of tanai, you didn't say the oil past half hour is not mitzvah oil, you just filled it up bistam. So you made all of that Chanukah Neris oil. Hooked a kol hashemin, it's all hooked to l'mitzvasai. Im loy dehista l'chatchila, unless you spoke out of t'nai beforehand, shalo ye'aser el kashir, that only the half-hour oil should become aser. V'ayin le'el b'sibit tafrei shayin beis v'yishter bursiv katan zayin. Okay, so now what do you do with this leftover oil? According to both of these shitas, According to one shita, it's only the half-hour oil. According to the second shita, even the 4-hour oil. What do you do with this oil? Says the Mechaber, Oisaloi Medura, make a torch, v'sarfai b'fnei atzmai, and just burn it up. Sharei huktzah l'mitzvasai, because you can't use it for anything else. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut yutef, v'sarfai b'fnei atzmai, and burn it up. Why? You might think, what do you mean? I'll put it in a jar, I'll hold it for next year. No, you can't do that. You're going to have oil that's aser ba'ana sitting around for a year. We're afraid someone's going to scramble eggs with it. Even if you'll go put it in a repulsive keli, so you certainly won't come to use it for salad dressing. Gam ken aser, it's still prohibited. Because we're afraid they'll use it for fuel, to warm yourself, or for something else. Okay, says the Mechaber weiter. If this leftover oil that's aser b'hana gets mixed into other oil, and it's not batal b'shishim, you don't have 60 parts against it to be mevatel it. Yesh mi she'omer, there are those that say she'ein lo haisav alav k'dei levatel, that you are not allowed to add additional chulin oil in order to be mevatel it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, chav she'ein lo haisav alav v'harim yaredei sibit tzadik tes sevav diyesh matirin. There are those that are matir, but chol iser d'Rabbanan, this is only an iser d'Rabbanan, lo haisav alav im nisarev to be mevatel it l'chatchila v'lochein kasav kan yesh mi she'omer, and that's why the Mechaber writes this in the format of only a yesh mi she'omer. Okay, Baruch Hashem, between yesterday and today, we caught up another page. I think we might be within one page or 2 pages, I'm not sure. All right, thank you so much for joining me for Liban HaTorah. The schus of Liban HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shem should send Yeshua's Refuas, Parnasa, Tzedukah to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the Bias Kal Tzedek, B'mher v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.